Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. Welcome to today's discussion, which is going to be focused around the topic of smart and healthy buildings. I'll kick off with a bit about myself and our company. So I'm Rod King. I'm a chartered surveyor who spent almost 20 years in the real estate industry in various roles, working with property consultants, family offices, and investment funds, covering both commercial and residential property. I recently joined as head of UK at SmartPoint, who are pioneers in the PropTech space with an entrepreneurial and forward-thinking approach. SmartPoint are an English-speaking Spanish headquartered company who are well established in continental Europe and have recently been crowned PropTech of the Year 2020. For those that are not familiar with the technology, SmartPoint is a leading smart locker system utilizing both services and package management, significantly reducing business labor costs. So on to today's webinar. I'm privileged to be joined by four esteemed panelists whose respective experiences range from traditional real estate through to tech innovation. I'll briefly introduce you to them, and then we'll ask them to provide a more detailed explanation of their roles and, in a nutshell, sum up their definition of a smart and healthy building. So first of all, we have Andy Saull of CBRE. Andy has an interesting and diversified background in professional rugby and working with a VC fund before joining CBRE as a PropTech consultant. So welcome, Andy. If you just want to elaborate on that introduction.
Cheers.
As I say, if you can just sum up in a nutshell what your definition of a smart and healthy building looks like.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rod. After finishing sport 3 years ago, I moved into Oxford University in a research institute there called the Future of Real Estate Initiative, where we were looking at the impact of technology across the real estate industry in all different facets, from occupier markets to capital markets to development construction. From there, as you rightly point out, I joined Pi Labs as the head of research and strategy, very much doing a similar role as I was doing at Oxford. And I guess the way to explain my current role at CBRE is that in a lot of my research, there was a lot of people talking about the brilliance of technology, and there was a lot of people talking about shiny new assets and the impact technology can have. There are very few people summing up how to get the technology into those assets and into those developments. And there's still a big question mark in the industry, I feel, around how do we actually engage with startups? How do we think about which technology providers to select? And the team that I've joined at CBRE, the digital advisory team, is put in place to do just that. So with occupiers, landlords, developers, and we help them get from the technology to the kind of end sustainability goals that we keep reading so much about. So it's a really interesting space to be in. And my kind of thoughts on smart and healthy buildings are those that are designed and they understand the occupier and the purpose of why they exist almost. So, one size fits all design for offices is no longer, and buildings no longer works. If you're in the commercial arena, if you're a lawyer, you want something completely different than a salesperson, let's say. And so a smart building is one that can adapt and enable those people within it to flourish. And within that, a healthy building is one that provides the biggest satisfaction and obviously the key health benefits. We've all been talking about air quality a lot recently with COVID, so that's a low-hanging fruit. So thank you very much, Rod.
Thanks, Andy. So next up, we have Bridget Wilkins of Built ID. Bridget's a director of community engagement in ESG, and she has a wealth of experience in real estate and tech. So welcome, Bridget. And again, if you can just shed a bit more light on yourself, your current role, and what your definition of a smart and healthy building looks like.
Fantastic, thank you, Rod, and great to join the panel today. And I'm sure share some common themes and hopefully some ones that spark a good debate as well. So by way of background, I've been working in real estate and urban development for 13 years now. I almost lost count after 10, I think, probably the same, Rod. It's a long time, but despite being involved on the advisory side, the capital market side, and more recently the development side, it's been really interesting working both in the Asia Pacific and the UK markets during that time to see the evolutions of smart buildings quite rapidly evolve and accelerate, particularly alongside the development of the PropTech sector. And we're seeing these two sort of worlds get closer and closer. And Andy, you're probably colliding them in some conversations and projects as well. So I think that's quite an interesting space. And, you know, it's great to share some wins and insight in that as well. So my current role at Built ID is to scale our PropTech platform, which is a community consultation platform called Give My View. And that really seeks to connect the developer in a planning and occupier context with their community, whether it be inside or outside the building, or even many years before they actually achieve practical completion. So it's a really interesting space when we talk about communities, occupiers, and where some of those lines might blur and connect and overlap. And for me, I think if I had to define smart buildings, I'd keep it simple really to 2 points. One is, to me, a smart building is a building that really seeks to support the community it's actually designed to serve, and that community could be both inside and outside the building. You know, almost to Andy's point, let's build buildings that reflect the needs of the people who are actually going to use them. I think there's been many case studies where, unfortunately, you know, the best building, the best design, the most compliant, ticking all the green star boxes, but it's empty. And we've got an issue there. We've got a disconnect between the community and the property and places we're trying to build. And the second point is, a smart building for me is a building that gives back as more, if not more, than it takes, particularly from an environmental impact as well. So obviously there's a huge discussion around net zero and carbon offsetting, but I'd love to get to a point in a few years where we're talking about carbon positive buildings around regenerative architecture, where we're actually giving back more to the grid and communities as part of that development process as well.
Great, thank you, Bridget. And next up, we have Axel Harris, who's joining us from Paris. So welcome, Axel. And,
thank you, Rod. And thank you for inviting me also. So I'm Axel, I'm the co-founder of Myroffice. At Myroffice, we are a young startup working in the real estate sectors, and our goal is to make buildings smart and healthy. So it's quite what we are discussing right now. And how do we do that? By digitizing and automating the cleaning in offices, and giving transparency to our customers and decreasing the building carbon footprint by 80% when it comes on to cleaning. And what we think about a building that is, let's say, smart and healthy, we think it's a building that empowers the people inside. We think that's a building that helps people collaborate, create, and make them feel safe also. So for us, a smart building give back to their people and help them to collaborate mainly.
Great. Thank you, Axel. Thank you, everyone. So here at SmartPoint, we are mostly concerned about a building's CO2 emissions and the health and well-being of its occupants. Examples of this include reducing the number of parcel drop-offs and collections to each building, and also offering, say, healthy meal choices, which a consumer can acquire via the SmartPoint. What factors does your organization take into account when considering a smarter and healthier building? So, Axel, would you like to kick off with that one?
Yes, okay, I can start. Of course, when we think about a smarter building, we also think about buildings that helps people thrive and have a better life also. And that's exactly what we are doing. By pushing new technologies into the cleaning sectors, for example, into buildings, we are automating the cleaning of the floors. So now the janitors who was coming at night beforehand because the vacuum was making a ton of noise and disturbing people, now can come back during the day. So we are giving back, thanks to our technologies, a daily life to the janitors, as the robot is operating during the night when no one is there. So this is one of the first steps we think that makes us building smarter than beforehand. Next step is also, thanks to new technologies, you can make your building evolve into something greater, greener, by optimizing also the electricity consumption, water consumption to clean your floors. So this is the two steps we are fighting for right now. And there is a third one when you don't need anymore someone to inspect the quality of your building. Beforehand, when you were cleaning your buildings, for example, you had to have someone which was called a quality inspector, just to check that the cleaning has been made. Now, thanks to the fact that we have pictures on the internal of every buildings. We know exactly through dashboards what has been done, what has been cleaned. So we don't need someone else to come into the buildings that should check manually by eye checking what has been done and if it has really been done. So we are avoiding some people commuting to the buildings. We are optimizing the electricity and water consumptions, and we are giving also back life to the janitors.
Yeah, fantastic. And Axel, how are you monitoring this in real time? I mean, it must be difficult to pinpoint.
So we have developed several IoTs that we connect to web platforms, and on this web platform, every single of our customers has access to an account, and on this account, he can see exactly what has happened into the office. So he can switch from one floor to another, one building to another. For example, if you have one building in Paris, one building in London, and in every offices, you will find the pictures of the day taken by the janitors, because we are changing his job. Beforehand, he was vacuuming, mopping. Now he's taking care of robots. He's taking pictures of the job done. And so you know exactly when the picture has been taken every day and where it has been taken. So you have a control already online, thanks to the fact that he is taking pictures during his day.
Okay, thanks for that. So on to you, Andy. How would you answer that question in terms of what factors does your organization take into account, and more so your clients' buildings? How do you pinpoint out of them?
So I mean, I've only been within CBRE for the last month, but I can certainly discuss kind of the evolution of this concept over time. And I think people used to think a smart building was a good location with a long lease to a tenant with a strong covenant. More and more, smart buildings become a green building. It's become a building that is environmentally and resource efficient. And I think that the cusp we're now on, and we're certainly looking towards, with companies such as Bridget's, Axel's, and yours, Rod, is this evolution of the social sustainability of an asset. So how can we now start measuring these less quantifiable metrics such as happiness, productivity, the harder measurements such as space utilization, with the rise of hybrid working models? How can we repurpose the space that is not being used into a way that creates a more productive environment for the occupants? So when I think about smart buildings, it's one that's already been built or one that doesn't need to be built. We're in a climate crisis, and it's up to 75% of carbon emissions can be embedded at construction. So let's not think about demolishing buildings and building shiny new tower blocks. Let's try and repurpose existing assets, or make use of those assets we already have in the best way possible. And so some of the smartest technologies we're currently getting from clients is things such as space booking and space monitoring platforms, so they can understand how people are using their space, where they're most productive, why and when they're using that, so that they can repurpose those spaces they're not using, and or downsize or resize and basically create that social sustainability aspect that is now becoming ever more important in the real estate asset decision making process.
Yeah. Andy, just to elaborate on that point, so your specific role, being part of one of the world's largest real estate advisory businesses, I'm assuming that you must get approached frequently by tech-related companies, for example, looking to promote their product, and using your platform to effectively to reach out to the numerous amounts of clients that you have out there. So firstly, how do you as a house at CBRE go around analyzing these new products that are hitting the market, and then secondly, filtering through them to promote that to your respective clients?
So the beauty of having such a big organization is there's a wealth of expertise, and there's also an individual within CBRE, in the office I'm sat in right now, whose job it is to market scan technologies. So there is a sole person whose role it is to keep an eye on what tech is hitting the market. The example I used previously, the desk booking platforms that companies are currently asking us for, we've undertaken a really big market scan on 100 different providers. That was mainly desk research, And so, there are quite a few. We're all in the same PropTech world. You see the big names winning the awards and making the headlines in the media and raising lots of money, so they're well known. But then also, there's platforms out there such as Unisu, are one that lists a lot of technology companies. Crunchbase are very good for technology companies. So once we've compiled this list of 100, we then go internally to CBRE and we say, right, we're all having discussions with clients. We've all been involved in the built environment for a long time. Which are the market leaders? Which 25 of these 100 have traction? Have funding, have lots of clients, have proven use cases, have really nice user interfaces. With those 25, we then will send a questionnaire, or we'll send a questionnaire trying to determine some key differences and then arrange some demos. And ultimately, the difficulty with in establishing the differences between systems is, in fact, it's all about understanding the client's requirements. So we never go back and we would never say, we've looked at 100 technologies, here are the 3 that CBRE recommend you should use. Because it is so circumstantial towards, as we've already discussed, what's your building, what's your job, what's your community, what are your needs, as Bridget spoke to earlier, what does the local community, what's it like, what's the area the building's in. So the role my department plays at CBRE is then uncovering those requirements. And only once you've uncovered those requirements can you then go and select the appropriate technology provider to give to your client. So we do have a short list of, let's say, 25 of the 100, but within that 25, I guess all bets are off depending on what exactly the client wants, what price point, how quickly they need it delivered, and what the needs of their employees are with regards to that booking technology anyway.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. Hi, Bridget. Tracking to the original question there of what factors does your organization take into account when considering a smarter and healthier building? What definition is that to your organization?
I think a lot of it's already been discussed, particularly from Andy, in terms of the wider, I think, expectation and aspiration of the development community to really push the boundaries of what buildings could deliver for the occupiers and the community. So when we talk about ESG, the E is the obvious stuff, if I can be that simplistic. What about the S? What about the G? And how do we create some level of transparency and governance between ourselves to monitor our impact, both from the business performance, but also the well-being and productivity of the people within those businesses and buildings. But to really answer your question, Ron, I think I've got sort of 3 C's I might mention. So for us, the first element is always around connectivity. So how can buildings have or enable a digital-first approach, particularly in a remote hybrid scenario that I think is now the norm going forward post-pandemic. We've seen the rise of platforms such as WideScore sort of really accelerate the expectation from the market that there needs to be a level of digital connectivity within buildings. But I think it's interesting to then explore what that could mean between businesses themselves, occupiers and teams, and probably using some of the technology that Andy's referred to in terms of those booking and collaborating apps where people can really start connecting to each other within buildings and also outside them as well. There's some really interesting startups that are doing that, connecting occupiers to local businesses and F&B restaurants, and I think that's quite an interesting space, particularly given they have rewards and incentives as part of their program. The second element is really around collaboration. So everyone's connected. How do we get together digitally or in person to facilitate that magic buzz, that water cooler chat that is so critical to staying engaged, hiring, retaining the best talent, staying inspired, sharing ideas, winning and securing business, et cetera, et cetera. We did a really interesting piece of work with the City of London at the start of the year, which was around returning to work and returning to the square mile. And, we asked people, what's going to bring you back? Because it's often hard to justify now getting on a train or a tube for a certain period of time and traveling to work. We've gotten used to it being at home. And we had 11,000 people view, the platform. We had 4,500 people respond and sort of give their view on what's going to bring them back. And, out of all the data and all the information, it comes back to people want connection. People want to stand around and gossip and talk and connect and feel part of a team, a cause, a mission, an organizational purpose. And that stuff, I think, is really hard to deliver when you're working remotely. But if you can facilitate that level of collaboration in businesses through how you're designing space, shared open workspace, and technology using, I think it gets really interesting. And leads into my third and final point, which for us, we're always looking for the community wins. So what are the really often quite easy and obvious shared wins between communities, developers, and wider stakeholders that often are quite cost effective, but could be very powerful in bringing people back to work, keeping them engaged, and for all the other benefits as well. Sometimes it could be as simple as we want a pet-friendly policy, or we want to be able to work different hours a day and have a different security access. You know, again, none of those things really cost money. That's really around having a different type of conversation at a different point of, you know, negotiating with an occupier or an estate manager. So I think that to me is the interesting part of exploring and expanding what those wins could look like. The first thing is to actually ask people what they want, and the second thing is to keep an open mind of how we could deliver them with a mindset that it actually might not cost the earth, but it might deliver some really good outcomes along the way.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so one of the points I was going to mention, which you've partly answered, Bridget, is so since the outbreak of COVID, we're seeing a more flexible approach to the working week. Some employees claiming to be more productive when they're working fewer hours, fewer condensed hours, perhaps at different times of the day, out with normal traditional office hours, and perhaps even at weekends. So, you know, how has this trend been viewed and factored into the workplace? And, you know, has it been met with resistance or acceptance, generally speaking, by employers? And in particular, now that they're so focused on the well-being of employees, you know, is this been taken into account? Have they woken up to the fact that well-being is very important and it needs to be addressed?
I think, I mean, I don't want to make too many general statements, but I think almost every single person in the world, if they've been working for the last 12 or 18 months, has had their own moment of reflection on how I'm optimizing my mental well-being, my physical productivity, both at home and when I return to work. I think we've all had those moments. And I think what's interesting is when you're starting to move back to getting back to the office, whether it's 2, 3, 4 days a week, what that looks like, particularly for sort of middle management and director level. I think then it's a question of demographics and who really is wanting what and how to match that up. We've got demographics saying we can work remotely, we're autonomous, we're independent, talk to me through a screen, I don't want to communicate in person. And that works to a point, but then you have, you know, in a team context, you have some people go, I need to come to the office for other reasons and I want that human connection. So I think the management piece and developing a lot more soft skills in the workplace is really crucial going forward to help sort of bridge the gap. I would say the next 12 to 18 months to sort of hopefully settle down to a level of some level of stability. I mean, I think interesting looking at Scotland's announcement this week around looking at a 4-day work week. Will the UK do the same? Will London do the same? Who knows? But I think it's an interesting space to be in. And the number one and most important issue is to ask people what they want and look at why that is. Is it around wellness, well-being, getting out of the home, having connection, meeting people, and then seeing if you know you can deliver some of those wins as a business owner, a manager, or a developer as well.
Understood. Yeah.
There's some.
That's a big your take on that, Andy, being part of a big operation yourself, and how your things there behind.
Yeah. Okay. Again, we're really hopeful that there's going to be a return to the office, and we don't see much. We see a transformation in the use of the office, but we don't see a reduction necessarily in the amount of foot space required. I think the interesting thing I'd like to build, because I was researching the whole smart building concept for 2 years, and there's some incredible stuff out there. The first bit of research that really interests me is that MIT Real Estate Innovation Lab, the Michigan Institute of Technology in America, they found that those buildings that can deliver on well-being and the healthy buildings can actually achieve 4.4 to 7.7% rental premiums. So there's value in delivering a healthy building. That's the first bit of research that, you know, no one's actually been able to put a financial value on this social soft metric, and suddenly, you know, we're now getting these skills, these benchmarks that we're able to now compare buildings and their values and what they're achieving on these well-being and health benefits, such as the well building standard, to be able to define a value on a healthy building. The second really interesting piece that I think is where I believe the future of the office will go, and it speaks exactly to what Bridget says, which is knowing your individual. There's not a one size fits all. There's not you know, lawyers will do this. I know I made that earlier, and salespeople will do that. Mm-hmm. In fact, I believe there's a lot more nuances around introvert, extrovert, your own working styles. And there's an amazing study done by a group called the Leesman Occupier Index. They produced a occupier survey for over 1 million people globally, based on their perception of their office, what they liked, what they didn't like, and whether it made them feel productive. They then took the exact same sample group of 1 million people, and I think they managed to get 200 or 100,000 respondents talking about what they liked and what they didn't like about home working. So you had this amazing control group of the same people talking about their office life and their home life, of what made them happy, what didn't. And their biggest finding was, alongside the more obvious, you know, how old you are, where, you know, whether you have individual space, whether you have dependents and kids at home or in the office. Their main finding was it's actually the relative difference between your home and your office determines whether you want to return to the office or not. Now that's a really obvious thing to say, right? If you don't like your home and or you've got an amazing home and you're going to a rubbish office, you're not going to return. Whereas if you've got a rubbish home and an amazing office, you're more likely to want to return. But I would now ask, back to Bridget's point, how many companies, how many landlords, how many property managers have surveyed those people in their building to understand their relative difference between home and the office? Do we know these individuals? Do we know whether they have kids, whether they're elderly? Has anybody stress tested exactly what the people, the individuals, not just the heads of HR, not the heads of real estate from the occupier organizations, the actual individuals in that company, what they want? And that will then paint this really clear picture of, okay, 80% want remote work because they fit into this very obvious bucket of people that, you know, they're extroverted, they want to come to the office, their home's, you know, inner city, cramped and busy. We need these tools. We need to understand, you know, things like utilization data, things like satisfaction data, things such as built ID, what the community want, and give a voice to those individuals. So the more information people can gain about the individuals within their buildings, and it'll be completely different across assets, the wiser we will be about understanding what is the future of work, without sitting and being all hypothesizing and, you know, is the office dead? Is the office alive? Is the city dead? Is the suburbs going to grow? And until we start doing this exercise, we won't know for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Axel?
It's a bit different in France, I would say, because we are working 5 days a week, but 35 hours a week since a long time. So for us, it's quite different. And I think the war is, you know, on another place right now. It's more about working from home or working directly into an office. And this is where we are becoming more flexible. There is some acceptance about it. So no CEOs, management prefer people to work from their home at least 2 days a week and work into the office 3 days a week. But now we are seeing a new trends, and in these trends we are seeing employees that want to come back to the office because they want to have connections, they want to collaborate, they want to be part of the team, and they want to have a goal when they are working. They are looking for meaning actually in their job. So I think that's one of the new mission of companies, is to giving back real meaning to what people are doing, removing some layers of managers who are not maybe the most useful, and giving a North Stars to everyone into their mission. So in France, it's kind of the new trends, and it's really having a meaning doing your job, and also having a balance between your personal life and your professional life, but mainly having a sense on what you are doing.
Interesting. Okay. So Axel, just continuing on with you. I mean, you've a fairly unique, revolutionary product which are deploying into office buildings. So can you just share with the fellow panelists and the audience just how the system functions, and along with the benefits towards a building's health?
Yeah, regarding the buildings, we have several benefits. First one, we have benefits regarding the environment. As we are decreasing the carbon footprint by 80% from every single building, we are taking care of the building by itself thanks to technologies. So as we are using robots to clean the floors, to mop the floors, now you are optimizing exactly the consumption of electricity and water use to clean your floor. So it's not a human, who is randomly going through the office with his vacuum. It's not happening anymore. So this is the first step on the, let's say, the environmental protection that we are providing to customers. Second step is on a social standpoint, we are giving back a daily life to the janitors. So we are changing these jobs. Before us, when you are asking for janitors, you would have to come during the night or really early during the morning, between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. in general. Because when he was doing the vacuum, he was making a ton of noise. So now that the robot is operating during the night, the janitors can come back during the day in the office because it does not make any noise at all. So it is not disturbing anyone working in the office. So this way, you are giving back a daily life. You are also removing all of his pain, his backbone, because he's not arced during all the day vacuuming. You are also helping him hearing better because he doesn't have 75 decibel in his ears 24 hours a day. So for him, you are changing the job. You are giving him something quite new, something easier, something better. So for him, it's really a new job, and you are transforming his way of life. And last, for the customers, we are also improving the quality. Thanks to the fact that we have developed a web platform, that we are using IoTs to control and monitor exactly how much soap you will use, how much paper towel you will use, thanks to the fact that you have map generated by the robots every night, and you have also pictures of the janitor taken by the janitors of what he has done during his work. You know exactly. You have a transparent way of what has been done during the day for your cleaning. So now you don't need to trust your cleaning company. Now you know that it has been done. So you are building the trust thanks to the transparency. And so through one web platform, you can know exactly what has happened for your cleaning in your office in Paris, in your office in London, in your office in New York, if needed. And we won't needed to call someone. We won't need an office managers or a quality inspector to check that everything has been done. You are certain that it has been done. So you are making the building also safer for employees because you know that every hotspot has been cleaned thanks to specific products to tackle the COVID, for example. You know that the floor has been mopped, not it's been also a vacuum. So you have transparency, and we are giving back controls to the office manager or the workspace managers.
Okay, thank you. So the next question, and Axel, if you don't mind answering this first, because it could be a continuation of what you just talked about. So have any of you encountered any specific barriers to entry in deploying smart and healthy concept into buildings? So examples could be issues relating to logistics, clashes with outdated technology, linking up with existing operating systems, and compromised design configurations of buildings, security.
I've been working in the innovation for the past 10 years, mainly in the healthcare sectors, but also real estate. And it's always the same. When you are providing innovations, the first barrier that we encounter is the culture of the people working, culture of the managers, culture of the CEOs. So you have to convince them, you have to bring them some values. So of course we have encountered a ton of barriers. We had to convince at first our first customers. We had to convince also Microsoft for them to operate with our technologies, because there was also a question about security. We are providing some IoTs, so we know that cybersecurity is becoming a major trend now. And the main problem is always the same, is the change management that you have to force a bit.
Yeah. Andy, if you don't mind just answering that question in terms of barriers to entry and in relation to any specific tech that you've been working on recently.
Yeah, there are numerous. So I wrote a report about 3 years ago where we looked at regulatory. So what laws were in place legally? Is this allowed? Is it permissible? Are there any regulations around it? Obviously, we looked at social, which again Axel is talking towards, and we looked at operational. So does it fit in with existing systems? Do people know how to use it? Is there a big training program that needs to be undertaken by the employees, by the building owners in order to use that technology? The department, fortunately, the department at CBRE that I'm now a part of, Digital Advisory, has only been around for 2 years, and it is growing exponentially for this exact reason. People do not know how to use technology. So in previous roles, we had people coming to us thinking that simply, investing in a venture capital fund meant that they would become digitally savvy and they would have this access to digital transformation while they didn't have a single innovation budget. They didn't have a head of innovation. They had no innovation champions. They had no knowledge of how to conduct a pilot. And so they simply thought, buying an off-the-shelf solution meant, oh, we're now future-proof. So I completely agree with Axel. First and foremost, you need to understand this cultural and organizational structure that is required in order to become an innovative company or an innovative manager. Secondly is the ability to sift through the number of solutions. So you understand that, we understand we've got this culture set up. And second, you need to identify your requirements. So do you have the correct structure? Yes or no? Do you know your requirements? Do you know what your problems are in order to understand what technology might solve them? Third is being able to source through these similar technologies to identify best in class. Fourth, there's a problem of actually having the expert knowledge to understand the specifications of those technologies. So I can sit here and talk about sensors and their benefits and pros and cons, but I can't tell you at all what operating system they work on, what building management system they can integrate with. So actually having that technical engineering expertise. And then finally is this adoption piece. So yes, you've got all the tech in, you've got the culture, you've gone through all the market, you've found the solutions, you've integrated it, but then actually getting people to use that technology. There's this big part about corporate change, getting the individuals to trust the technology, to download the app, to adopt the platform, to use the new system, and to move. A lot of this is to do with actually getting them to stop using old systems. We're stubborn creatures. I use Excel because I've been taught on Excel since I was 12 years old at school. Trying to get me to something that isn't Excel, you need to teach me for 2 years. And I don't have that time for 2 years. That's 2 years I'm not going to perform my job as well as I could be using Excel, even though for the remainder of my career it might help me. So there are these massive barriers to entry, which I think people simply overlook. They think buying a technology solution, which in Axel's case, it may work perfectly, because it's an automated robot. That kind of solution can be installed and used off the shelf. But many of these technologies require huge corporate transformation and education pieces, which is what's it's so brilliant that this department has been set up understanding that and trying to provide it to everything from, I said, developers, landlords to corporate occupiers.
Mm-hmm. And it seems to me, Andy, in the especially, let's say, the commercial and landlord space now, they have dedicated teams focusing on new tech innovations, and a lot of this has to do, with the end result is having to retrain certain members of staff or employing specialists in that field, and perhaps some tech may require, say, the reconfiguration of their buildings, which may come at a cost. So they've got these factors to weigh up, and there's going to be initial investment required up front before the return is seen further down the line.
Yes, certainly, and if you're a major occupier or a major landlord, you can afford to have these skills in-house. But I mean, I would imagine the majority of commercial real estate around the world is owned by smaller landlords or even single holdings. They don't have the in-house expertise to understand how to determine an ROI on a technology like an occupancy sensor or an air quality monitoring system. And so being able to outsource that to people like ourselves really helped provide that business case and help deploy that technology. And almost we are acting as that R&D department for those smaller firms, because we're not going to suddenly stroll into Google and tell them what they should be putting in their HQ. I mean, I'm sure we would love that. We'd probably make some serious fees off that, but I would imagine that there are people in there who know exactly how to deal with technology, probably more so than we do. But yes, there's certainly difficulties of understanding costs and understanding the training times, and there's a lot more to this than people believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Bridget, if you would like to just answer that question about barriers to entry, and also just given that your business is mainly focused on community engagement, if you could just share with us, ways in which, say, developers, for example, can engage with occupiers and the surrounding community, and how they go about in their approach to the use of smart and healthy technology.
Sure, I'll try and wrap that into one response, Rod. I mean, I think echoing a lot of the comments to date around, you can buy a product off the shelf, or you can try and build one in-house, but you have to be able to deliver it and develop it. And I think it'd be really interesting in a few years' time, once all of this tech and PropTech is integrated, looking back retrospectively on, measuring some of the impacts, rather than relying on, a lot of forecasting from where we sit today, trying to figure out sort of explicit ROIs on that initial investment. I think my overarching comment to the question around the biggest barrier is, I think we just need a lot more collaboration, a lot more open discussions, a lot more wider engagement between different stakeholders, developers, advisors like Andy at CBRE, and the PropTech market to, look at a problem and go, can we find an easy solution here? I mean, speaking on behalf of Built ID, but I'm sure a number of other startups and high, fast-growing tech businesses across the UK, I think there's a perception that this stuff costs a lot of money. It's very expensive to have PropTech. It's very expensive to have technology. And yes, it's more, than hiring a surveyor to look at leases and do some initial assessment. But it's a completely different conversation. And whatever the cost is, let's look at the cost of not doing that. Let's look at what a 6-month vacancy costs you. Let's look at what your top 3 competitors getting 25 basis points on their cap rates and yields get compared to you when you go and raise funds next year around for some more capital. Like, there are some big costs here of not implementing technology in some of these products. And I would guarantee if any developer, at least with Look ID, came to us and said, listen, we haven't got X, we've got Y. Any company in these day and age wants to have a conversation around finding ways just to start the process. I think it's just about, let's just get started and see if it works. Otherwise, there's a risk we sit in this theoretical world, debating it all and the cost for many more months than we actually have in reality. And we lose the advantage of time and being ahead of the curve. We worked with Transport for London on a project, we were sort of 5 months out of the oven, so to speak, for that product. We launched on 7 sites with TfL. It was our 8th client. I would never have thought TfL would be our, our first 10 clients, but they were so keen just to get started. And the value of just getting started and collaborating rather than trying to just do it piece by piece and justify as you go along, I think speaks to the results and sort of answers your second question, Rod, around, how can developers engage their communities? Developers should just engage their communities, and there's always a people focus and there's a tech focus, depending on the type of use class and where you're at in your development and delivery cycle. How we work in practice is we run alongside a traditional consultation where instead of people coming to a town hall, we use digital social media platforms, and we typically generate around 2,000% times higher level of responses and engagement. But again, that can vary on the project and where it would be. We just did one in Milton Keynes. We got 7,500 voters in 4 weeks. We did one in Ireland. We got 5,000. Again, it depends if it's renewable energy, smart buildings, or a smart mixed-use development, and who you're engaging with in that conversation. But it's not just about getting a big shiny number. It's about what you do with it. I think that is really interesting for us. As our projects we've been involved on are starting to be built and delivered, how those pieces of community feedback can then be implemented as part of the design and occupier strategy. I'll give another example because I think it just helps demystify where we're trying to get to. We worked with Berkeley Homes on a very large scheme in West London, and I think it's going to be a smart building. It's going to be a smart resi building. We need more, smarter resi buildings. And we had 1,400 people respond to our consultation online in about 3 weeks. The number one thing the community wanted was a pop-up dog park. Pop-up dog park. I mean, how good? No one's asking to take off 4 levels of height or massing or compromise the ground floor plane or the retouch. We're just saying, give us some AstroTurf to take a dog for a walk on a Saturday morning and meet the neighbour. I mean, let's just start with that as a win. And I'm really excited to see how that happens in an office environment as well. So I think how do developers engage? You engage by engaging, not doing consultation, but doing meaningful engagement where the feedback actually is delivered and it actually can be translated into some wins for the community, particularly in an occupier sense, to get them back to work and back to wanting to be in an office building.
Yeah.
I'd love to just slightly build on that if I can, just by the big picture. We've known climate change has been happening for 60 years. If in the last 10, 20 years ago, you decided to minimize your climate impact, you would now be sat on a portfolio laughing. So we know that there's this problem of well-being and community and loneliness and, all these social issues. Why aren't people, just because we can't measure, we don't yet benchmark it, there aren't yet regulations in place, that they will come. In 20 or 30 years' time, we'll be able to measure the impact, the community impact of developments. And then if you're doing something I was going to say a rude word there, but half-baked currently, you're going to suffer the consequences in 20 years. So you may as well, as Bridget says now, just start somewhere and maximize the social sustainability of any asset, be it health, well-being, satisfaction, productivity, community, however you want to benchmark that. Try and maximize it now. So in 20 years' time, we will be able to measure this stuff. We will be benchmarking it, and there will be regulations. And then you'll be thankful you did it now, rather than trying to retrospectively, fit your assets as we're currently trying to do with energy efficiency.
Yeah. No, well said. Well said. It's certainly coming to the forefront, and it's high up on the list. Important. Okay, guys and girls, that's all we've got time for today. Unless you want to ask any questions of each other, then I think we'll just be checking off. It's 10 to 12, and Antonio texted me apologising. He said he could get on, but he couldn't speak. He couldn't get the mute off the screen, so he sends his regards and apologies.
I've got one for you, Rod. Just as a Scottish gentleman, how would you feel about a 4-day working week? Pro, anti?
To me, it's all about quality of work time, and it all depends on your circumstances as well. I think if you're working, let's say, in a big organization as part of a larger team, then perhaps you need to be more joined up, and you need to be working at similar times of the day, etc. So I don't think it's an easy question to answer in that respect, but I certainly think from a well-being point of view, I'm all for it, for sure. But then would working a 4-day week decrease the workload? Would it, in effect, just put the employees under more pressure to get more done in a shorter space of time, perhaps? Will Scotland go down that route? I do not know, but I think it could put a lot more pressure on the economy if they do. And
it's going to be fascinating to see unfold. I know that there was an experiment in Iceland that was a success, wasn't there, previously, which I believe the Scottish is based on. So yeah. I, for one, am all for a 4-day working week if my boss is watching this at all. Hi.
Yeah. But we shall see. So thanks again for your time, and thanks for all you viewers that have tuned in today, and hopefully you found this very useful.
Thanks very much, Rod.
Thanks for you.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Rod.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.